Years back, I was working with a coaching company and they had a phenomenal offer. And it was interesting because this particular coach had a massive name in the business, a huge following. They had been on TV and all sorts of different programs. People just knew who they were. They had written books, multiple bestsellers. As I started as a consultant, I was hired to come in and help basically build the sales team, right? Create a process. And part of what I would do in this model, and this has obviously evolved quite a bit since then, but in my model back then is I would essentially go to sales floors, local sales floors that had a phenomenal product. So you'd usually have a coach or a guru on the front, and then you have the sales team on the back, right? So when I started here, one of the biggest disconnects I saw is you've got phenomenal product, phenomenal fulfillment, phenomenal opportunity, and then a subpar sales process, right? So I would literally hear it in the salespeople's voice. One gentleman in particular, and I won't name names, but you could hear the trembling in his voice. He was petrified to be on these sales calls. Or the other person was just so nonchalant about it, not realizing what it costs to bring in these leads. And they would just burn them call after call after call, right? If they got an objection, essentially they would just get off the phone. So I saw this massive disconnect from, hey, we need to do 6 figures a week, easy 6 figures a week, otherwise this process isn't gonna work. And a sales team who didn't have the belief or the ability to go from here, right? So one of the biggest things that I saw in that process was, number one, I had to create believability, right? I had to show people, I had to show these salespeople that there was the ability for them to make, 6 figures or multiple 6 figures on this particular sales floor, on this account. But the biggest problem was getting them to believe that it was possible and that they were actually able to do that with the right help. So first things first, I stepped in and literally just started putting up as much coaching volume as I possibly could. I was doing that also while disqualifying the wrong people so that these salespeople, because they didn't know me, they didn't trust me, they didn't know whether or not it was just blowing smoke or not. So I had to put up as much coaching volume as possible while also disqualifying people that weren't a perfect fit so they could see these are the people we're looking for, right? These are the individuals that you should be having conversations with. These are the people that you should be asking the uncomfortable questions because they're ultimately going to give you what you need and they're ready for the help. I think the problem with most coaches though is they fall into a very similar criteria where if somebody's not pre-sold enough to where they can get on and tell them about their product or their service and then the client buys, it's like, oh, they just weren't a deal. So you've got all these leads that are filtering out the backside that you're not monetizing. And I would imagine a good portion, 20, 30, 40% of those people, maybe more, are perfect clients. But they need someone to have that conversation with them, to get in the trenches, to fully understand what's important to them. They need someone that understands the entire psychological system that happens from somebody getting on a phone call or a Zoom call to pulling out a credit card and reading off the 16 digits. You've got to understand, what doors do I have to close? I've got to understand, what am I looking for? What are the red flags? What are the green flags? What are the buying questions? What parts of my offer are irrelevant until the client's in? Until I'm actually coaching them, right? In a lot of cases, what I would hear is they would use the guru's name, right? Well, she's done this and she's been here and she's written this book and she helps people do this. And it's like they were just like vomiting information on them. Well, what that led to is it's a confused mind, right? A confused mind won't buy. And we've heard that and heard that and heard that. But think about it. Anytime you've purchased something or you've invested in a coach or a course or a program, my guess is that you had to logically connect that this particular program or this particular service would be a direct solution to your problem, right? As long as you did the work and if it was set properly, it's like, hey, you're the X factor. Our system already works. We know it works. And here's why. Are you willing to put in the time? Are you willing to step into a completely different mindset going from the consumer to the investor, right? So I start breaking down all the pieces of that conversation that have to happen where I'm literally asking most of the questions, 80, 90% of them. They're doing 80% of the talking. What happens is they lead themselves to the finish line where they don't look at me as a salesman. They look at me as a consultant. Right? I led them. I built trust. I built rapport by asking the uncomfortable questions that no other salesman or coach on the planet has been willing to ask. What I would urge you to do in your sales process, if you have one, analyze everything you're talking about and how much of your conversation are you doing to make you comfortable versus your client. If you don't have a sales process, you need to break down what has to happen. What are the areas of the conversation that I need to tighten up, right? Look at why you're asking those questions. If there's parts of the conversation you're bringing up, hey, why am I I talking about? Is that really serving the better good of helping this client go from here to there, right? Is there any sort of call flow or cadence to my sales conversations? Is there anything I can be doing differently to allow the client to open up to me in a way that actually makes sense, where they start to unravel, as I call it, they start to unravel the mess in their mind, right? You might ask a question about what they need and why they need it, and they might give you a surface level answer, not because they're guarded, sometimes they are, but not, in this case, not because they're guarded, but because it's starting to unravel. It's like the hamster wheel, right? It starts to slowly turn. Once they see that, it's like, oh, well, I guess that's not really the problem. You asked me, how long this is going on and what else I've tried to fix it. And truthfully, I don't think I've ever been able to find a solution. But what you just mentioned about, it's a sales problem versus a marketing problem makes a lot of sense. Or the question you just asked about, why I'm not hitting 30, 40, 50K months consistently and why I only have maybe a handful of 20K months throughout the year. I've always looked at it as I need more leads, but truthfully, I don't need more leads. I've got 10, 15 appointments on the calendar every week. If I could close at 40, 50% at a 5K offer, like I'm hitting really good numbers with the ability to scale, hire, build a team, right? So I want you to analyze what's going on in your process and take the ego and pride out of it, right? I think a lot of us coaches, we're really, really, really good at what we do, but that doesn't mean we're good at sales. It doesn't mean we're good at marketing. It doesn't mean we're good at fulfillment or client retention. So try to stay in your lane. And if sales is not your sweet spot, continue to go through the rest of my content, because you're going to find that there's little keys and nuggets that are having a massive impact towards the end of the conversation. When you get to the end and your client doesn't have to think about it, they don't have to go talk to a spouse. They don't have to come up with an excuse of why they need more time, because you help them unravel that entire process in their subconscious to where you got to the root of the problem, and they have complete confidence that if they do what you say, they're going to win.